Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Woo-hoo.
Hello, I'm Adrienne Metcalf. Welcome to Conversations with SOTU.
And I'm Josh Schwartzbach, the channel for SOTU.
Yes, Josh is a professional medium and he channels an energy that we call SOTU. SOTU is outside of time and space. And in just a moment, as you'll see, you'll meet SOTU. Josh will bring them forward and we're going to have a conversation. If you'd like to join in the conversation, we have a website where you can send in questions for SOTU on our contact page, and we'd love to have them. Josh, would you like to channel?
I'm ready. And so I'll do this right in front of you, just as I will every time that we do this, just so that you can see that there's not a great deal of mystery involved. And so,
Let me
yes,
just
Adrienne.
interrupt to say, SOTU would be the first to say, question everything that they say and decide for yourself whether or not it's true.
Right. All right, so here we go. All right, well. Welcome, everyone. We are SOTU, and we invite you to join us on another journey through the infinite realms of your imagination. For, dear ones, it is your imagination, your willingness to move beyond the status quo, at least within the dynamics of your own thoughts and your own feelings, and perhaps even your own words, that are going to allow you to make the transition into a new world with much more ease and much more elegance. For, dear ones, that is what is really possible. Movement into the dynamics of an advanced civilization with grace and elegance. All right, so you have something for us today.
Well, last week in our last show when we talked, you discussed the fact that we'd had a childhood as a species, an infancy that some refer to as paradise, but then we moved into our adolescence. And I'm just wondering if you could talk more about how that happened.
Well, certainly so. You know, there is evidence everywhere in the dynamics of your world that speaks to these dynamics. And we certainly do speak of it in very metaphorical terms, so that you might gain a certain measure of understanding. The first thing that you must understand, well, you don't have to understand it, but it would serve you to understand it. One of the first things to understand is the metaphor that we speak of is transcendent of any number of civilizations, actually 5, that have existed here on your planet, on your mother, the Earth, over a period of millions of years. We think that you have found fossilized remains of primate-like humans all the way back to 6 million years. And so please understand that your history as a species stretches all the way back to that dynamic. Now, it's very difficult to shall we say, have an emotional understanding of the dynamics of infancy, and except to understand that the metaphor really is that you are in many ways helpless. And as we asked Adrienne, and dependent upon the mother, and as we asked Adrienne last year to define what an infant needs, her answer was?
Complete safety.
Mother.
Mother.
You need to have mother in order to assist you in the dynamic. So at what point would consciousness enter the dynamic? And so you must understand, consciousness is and continues to be an incremental journey, a step-by-step journey. So many of you are impatient. So many of you wish to jump to the end of the dynamic, but the truth of the matter is it is integrable. You do exist in a physical body in a linear timeline, and so if you begin to accept that, if you begin to understand that, if you begin to understand that it is only by the understanding of the linear that you can understand the quantum nature of it all, just to confuse you a little bit, that you will begin to understand. So we are giving you this basic, what shall we say, history, her story, our story,
Right.
this whole dynamic. We're giving this to you in a very linear sort of way, and yet the dynamics are not completely correct, because what we are doing is we're transcending a number of civilizations. In the beginning, you had a collective consciousness. We spoke a little bit about the dynamic last week, that if you saw, a flock of starlings, for example,
Yes.
is a really good example of that, where they flock together in sometimes, 10,000 birds, something like that, and they all are flying together, and it seems to be very chaotic and all of that, and yet nobody bangs into each other, and there's actually a real communication going on there, a communication that is almost like a super telepathy.
Yes.
It is a step beyond ESP. Understand that.
So
It is a step beyond ESP.
it's sort of a knowing.
Well, it's a knowing, but again, it's a subconscious dynamic. It is not like a knowing in the forefront of your consciousness. It is almost a dynamic of an instinctual knowing. And so if you understand that as a species, you too had that dynamic of that instinctual knowing. And the thing is that the place that earthly humanity holds within the reflection of the movement of all things. Now you must understand, you don't have to understand, but it would serve you to understand that an individual, as you are now, you have individuated to a very great extent in your world. As an individual, you have a certain amount of power, as you have a certain amount of empowerment. But as a species, you all of a sudden have a whole lot more empowerment. The problem is just getting on the same page, is it not? In order to be able to create a collective dynamic of awareness. Well, back in the garden experience, it was much simpler than that. There was not the dynamic of the belief or the understanding of I. There was only the dynamic of we. There was only the dynamic of the consciousness of the group. And, you have these normal subconscious desires. Food,
Yes.
play,
Yes.
bodily functions.
Yes.
And we do mean all bodily functions.
Yes.
And so you must understand there's a collective awareness. And there's a whole collective dynamic and a collective communication that goes on. There is no separation between any of you. There is no separation between nature. There is no separation between spirit. It was a oneness. Those of you that are still connected with nature, you understand that now, even now. Now, there are so many in your world that are detached from the dynamic, and that we would suggest to you that many of you out there that are feeling alone, that are feeling lonely, that are feeling separate, spend a little time in nature, and it will soothe your soul. It will ease your dynamic, and you may have certain answers. You may have certain understandings that you have been missing recently. For you are all in many ways going back to nature. You are all in many ways reconnecting with your Mother, the Earth. That is part of the dynamic of movement. That is part of the inner urge that you are all feeling to be more, that you are all feeling to grow. And so, through the dynamic of collective awareness, through the dynamic of direct cognition, you created a paradise. You were one with nature, and so fruit would appear on the trees. you lived in perfect harmony. And as we said last week, just as every child moves and grows, so too as a species did you move and grow. Just as every child needs to separate from the mother and the father. Why? To develop
An
an
identity.
identity of their own. Otherwise, how would you grow? If you had nothing but the template of your mother and your father, well, it would be a very boring world, wouldn't it?
Scary.
All right. Well, but again, this is the dynamic of growth. This is the dynamic of movement. This is the dynamic of understanding the metaphor of physical growth, and with the metaphor of physical personal growth in the body, you can understand the metaphor of the physical existence of a consensus reality, a collective reality that if you could just get yourselves kind of on the same pages, you might be able to recreate everything. But first you need to begin to question. So we realize we're jumping all over the place a little bit, but we will eventually get back to
the point.
That's this is a spherical dynamic. There are many layers to it, not the least of which is there's a physical layer, there's an emotional layer, and there's a divine layer, a spiritual layer. And so if you do begin to understand that, and you understand that these three dynamics work in conjunction with each other, then you will begin to understand that you are reality projectors. In the garden, you created through collective desire. But as we said, just as every child moves and grows, so too is it necessary as a species for you to move and grow and separate from the mother and father to develop an identity of your own. As a species, this is what occurred. You might consider that you spent perhaps 300,000 years in that paradise situation. In that situation where the manifestation of those things that you required, those things that you needed, those things that you desired in your world simply manifested, not on a conscious level. But from that dynamic of that collective relationship with the divine, that collective relationship with all that is, what was the next step? The next step was moving toward a more individuated nature, so that you might begin to move more into a dynamic of empowerment. You had grown as much as you as much as you could as a child. Now, just to complicate things a little bit, you also live in a duality, right? And although many of you would like to be able to transcend the dynamic, you also exist within the dynamics of male and female genders.
Yes.
And those dynamics of gender affect you all so much more than you are willing to admit now in your technologically advanced age. So many of you deny the true masculine within you. Many of you deny the true feminine within you. Now, please understand something, dear ones. This is a dynamic where each person, each individual, has a mixture of the two, the masculine and the feminine energy within the dynamic of self. And this has been because you have all had many lifetimes in both genders.
Yes.
However, if you are in a physical body, there is a tendency to move in one direction or the other. If you look at the dynamic of the true masculine and the true feminine, what do you find? In a very simplistic sort of way, and you find that the feminine is often the dreamer, is often not satisfied with the status quo, is often in a position where they reach a certain stage and they reflect the dynamic of the divine urge to be more in a, what shall we say, in a much earlier time than the masculine. You know, the dynamic of the feminine is to dream the new dream, and the dynamic of the masculine is to do whatever the feminine desires. In many ways, not in every way, but in many ways, the masculine would be happy to just manifest, manifest
Yes.
the feminine's dreams and desires.
Yes.
But the masculine is also can be, and not as all. Remember, there's a mixture here. We are not indicting anyone or anything in that sort of way, but we do wish to say that the masculine would rather just kind of sit in front of the cave on Sunday and watch football. And that is just to be of service, just whatever the feminine wants, and just give me a little time, and so I can just kick back and watch the game.
That template exists to this day.
Well, to this day, and please understand that that's a natural dynamic. If you look at the dynamic of the masculine tends to be the manifester, and at the same time, within the dynamics of the patriarch, well, we'll get into that, but in the dynamics of competition and comparison that you are living in. What?
Well, I got lost there for a moment. There is this competition that builds up on both sides, and a competition between the genders also.
Well, but understand something. It's a natural dynamic. This is a duality, all right? We're sorry, we didn't mean to lose you like that. The dynamic of the masculine and the feminine is the dreamer moving ahead, and over a period of hundreds of thousands of years, you have to understand there's a certain amount of growth, and especially after 100,000 years ago or so in paradise, it gets pretty darn boring.
Yes.
And so there would be a natural desire, a normal desire within that dynamic of the feminine to desire to have new experience, to dream something new, even if you didn't know what that was. And if you understand that the dynamic of collective desire would create a situation where what shall we say? An almost energetic, magnetic energy would go out into the universe, drawing to you the circumstances to allow you to take that journey of individuation. That journey of moving beyond the collective relationship with all that is, with the divine, with Mother Nature, with each other, to a separate one, where you could grow and you could be more. Now, the problem was your levels of naivete, right? You were not aware, really, of pain. You understood life and death. You understood your place in nature and your place in the world. And you were at peace in a very emotional way. Now, what's the quickest way to learn something?
Have the experience of it.
Have the experience of it, absolutely right. And so let us say, without going into a lot of detail this week, because we don't have enough time for it, that you attracted to you the opportunity to experience a dynamic of individual nature. Let us just say, hypothetically, you drew to you a species that already understood for themselves individuation. And because of your dynamic, your ability to directly cognate with pretty much anything within your environment, you all of a sudden
Had the
would
experience.
make that connection. And each of you, because it was a collective consciousness, would have all of a sudden an intense feeling of what it meant to be the other. And dear ones, in an emotional sense, if you can just engage in the dynamic of your imagination and allow yourself to resurrect perhaps some of those emotions, some of those feelings within yourself, you will remember the shock, you will remember the awe, you will remember the pain, because suddenly, instead of being safe, you were all on your own. And so you had a very traumatic situation occur. It can best be equated with the dynamic of what is called these days an adolescent wounding. A wounding that happens at a time in your adolescence where the rug is pulled out from under you and you emotionally crash and you emotionally burn. And that is considered your adolescent wounding. And that is considered the end of childhood. Now, if you can understand that, and understand that it was the first time that had ever occurred within the dynamic of your species, that that emotional rug was pulled out from under you, and all of a sudden you were left alone, you realize how traumatic the situation was. And in order to make the point of this whole session, we must say to you that this was the beginning of the battle of the sexes. This was the beginning of the war between the masculine and the feminine. But it was not a war in that sort of sense. For the feminine within that dynamic felt responsible for the movement. And have you ever heard of feminine guilt? Have you ever known a woman or someone locked within the dynamic of the feminine body that doesn't have that experience? The feminine at that time said, we're never going to allow ourselves to have that dynamic of direct empowerment again until we are wise enough, until we are mature enough to not do this again, to not cause that dynamic of separation again. And the masculine said, you're darned right. And if you can look at the metaphor of what is going on in your world right now, that is exactly what is playing out in the dynamics of your daily lives. All right, dear ones. This has been Conversations with SOTU, episode 2. The date is March the 6th, 2017. And we love you all so very, very much. And so until the next time, when we'll get into a little more detail about what the dynamic has been happening, since that separation, since that understanding. Remember last week, Adam, Eve, and the tree of knowledge. What was the knowledge gained? The knowledge gained that you were separate. You realized that you were naked in the sight of the divine. You were naked in the sight of God. All of a sudden you were seen. All right, dear ones, we love you so very, very much. And so until the next time we close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy.
Thank you, Josh. And just so that you know, we will be back again to continue this discussion. If you have questions for SOTU, please send them to our website, the contact page at www.conversationswithsotu.org. We also have a monthly meeting of Live with SOTU. The next one is March 24th, a Friday evening, and that's available on Skype and live, where you can speak with SOTU in an unfiltered situation. And if you go to our website, you'll also find SOTU's weekly message on YouTube called SOTUesdays. So that we hope you enjoyed all of this. We'll see you next time.
You may say I'm a dreamer,